if you have been to a pet food store in this or the previous century, you may have noticed that some of the different kinds of pet foods are, there's food for puppies, food for adult dogs, maintenance, performance, seniors. And so one of the big questions is, do puppies really need their own category? Do they need different food than adult dogs?
And how different is it?
Right.
And what are the differences? So we really want to look at, is there really a difference needed for puppies? The difference between doing that with commercial pet food versus fresh food. So what do puppies really need to eat? That's what we want to answer. So I think the first thing that we want to talk about is commercial pet food, because I think that's the most common.
Sure.
And a lot of people lean on AAFCO standards. Okay. So when you look at a bag of commercially made puppy kibble, you're going to see a difference from the adult formula in protein, calcium, and fat.
Right. So typically the puppy foods are going to be higher in those things. So I was thinking in terms of, what do puppies eat? Like, what did puppies eat before kibble? Right?
And so we look to nature for that answer, which is kind of our approach to dog health in general. So if we think about, wild dogs or, wolf pups, what are those puppies eating?
So at first, obviously, they're on mother's milk, and then when they're ready to eat real food, mom will go out and eat a bunny or a bird or something, and then we'll come home and regurgitate it for the puppies. So you have essentially a partially digested or pre-digested dead animal, and that's typically what the puppies will start with. As they grow, then they have to be trained into how to hunt, how to fend for themselves. And so usually when they're around 3, 4, 5 months, they'll start participating in some hunting, or one of the adult dogs or wolves will bring home an animal that is almost dead, or something like that. And then the puppies get to kind of practice their adult skills that they will need. But pretty quickly, they're eating whatever the adult dogs are eating. In some cases, the adult dogs, like I've heard this about the wild dogs in Africa, that they will let the puppies eat first. So maybe they are getting the best cuts of meat and whatnot. They get first dibs at the organs.
At the organs is a big one.
Yeah. But at some point, they're going to be part of the pack, and they will be hunting along with everybody else, and they won't get any special food.
So what do puppies nutritionally really need more of is the question. And the reality is they do need more protein, they do need more calcium, and they do need more fat. They are in the process of developing every single system in their body, and all of those extra nutrients are going to go to build the musculoskeletal system correctly. They're going to help, grow the brain and, feed that way. You're developing the immune system. There's a lot of different things that are forming very quickly. So not only do they need those extra nutrients, they also need, as far as their size goes, they're going to need a lot more food in proportion than an adult would to keep up with that growth rate. Exactly. So when we look at, the commercially made food, which is going to show on the label, higher amounts of those things in general, you're going to see more calcium, you're going to see more fat, you're going to see more protein. The trouble with that is they're not necessarily the most bioavailable versions of those things, nor are they actually the amounts that are going to help them fully develop and thrive. They're really minimums. And so we have a lot more control over all those factors when we feed fresh food.
Right. Because something that happens, then you have puppy food, and then you have large breed puppy food.
Right.
And there's been this long running argument in the pet and vet world about calcium phosphorus ratios and what's ideal and what will happen if you feed an adult food to a fast growing large breed puppy. And so in order to address that issue, what we do with puppies when we're feeding raw food is we feed them more raw edible bones, so a greater proportion of their dinner plate is going to be raw edible bones. And so when it comes to certain foods, there are some cooked foods that are on the market. What I always look for is to see what they're using as their source of calcium. Many times these companies are not using bones. They're using dicalcium phosphate or tricalcium phosphate, which is a synthetic. And you're just better off feeding your puppy extra raw bones. Now, it still has to fit into the amount that you've decided that you're going to feed them for that day. But I would just use bones because nature is not going to goof in that way. Nature will never lead you astray. If you feed raw animal parts, bones included, you're not going to mess up that all-important calcium-phosphorus ratio.
And even if you can find something where, it's an even better, made raw food or something like that that doesn't have bone in it, maybe they use eggshell membranes or, crushed up eggshells or bone meal, it's still just not as bioavailable. It's not as well balanced as the raw edible bones or these other couple of whole foods that we've mentioned. And so, no matter what you need to do to really kind of get those raw edible bones in there, we really encourage you to keep trying until you find things that are good for your puppy and that you're comfortable with. But I mean, really, those should be given at least 3 to 5 times a week with their raw food for sure.
And when we say edible bones, they're going to eat the whole thing. And so if you have a very small puppy, you might need to cut that chicken wing into smaller pieces, for example. They don't necessarily have to have it whole. If you're worried about them choking, or if they are very competitive, you have other dogs, everybody's eating fast. Obviously with bones, because they're so high value, you might need to separate your dogs, and it's probably easier if they just eat in their crates anyway.
Which is actually one thing I was going to encourage people to do, because we need to create positive association with that crate. Crate is a incredibly important safety tool, and it's actually one of my dog's favorite places to be sometimes. And so, we really want to create a positive association with that, and that's what we started our litters on. I mean, the minute they got raw meaty bones, when they were still with us at 4 weeks old, they were eating that chicken foot in a crate by themselves. There was no threat of resource guarding or anything else. Right. They were very comfortable being in a closed crate. Now, it was a wire, it was relatively felt open, but it was a wire crate with the door shut, and they were just fine as tiny little puppies. That's how we kind of want to condition that. So that's just something else, little kind of tip that you can multitask. You can multi-purpose.
Right, because obviously none of us want our dogs fighting with each other. We don't want them fighting over food. Keep the kids away. Keep people with bad manners away so that they're not trying to stick their hand in the puppy's food dish, or like you don't have to create resource guarding or create a dog who is growly at mealtime. If they eat by themselves in their crate and they feel secure, then they're going to be a lot happier. So those are things like chicken wings, duck wings, chicken backs, turkey tails, duck heads, pork ribs, all those sorts of things. What you choose is going to depend on the size of the dog, how big their mouth is, the shape of their mouth. Pugs and bulldogs and Frenchies, they have a harder time eating some things because their teeth are far apart from each other. And, in the case of those super short-nosed dogs, some of their teeth are in sideways because they have the same number of teeth. They're just smushed into a smaller space, like a shorter jaw, basically.
So the key components of getting the calcium correct are going to be having the correct amount of phosphorus to balance and help them take in and assimilate that calcium.
Right.
So the struggle and the problem with kibble for puppies is that it's typically a synthetic calcium, and it's typically way too much calcium, and you don't have anything stopping the growth rate of the bone to keep it in proportion with how the ligaments and the joints are growing. Right. And so you end up with much longer bones at times. Things are out of proportion. They can be more prone to injury as they get older. Whereas with natural sources like raw meaty bones, and there's a couple other calcium sources we'll talk about in a second that have that correct calcium to phosphorus ratio, it is going to allow their bones to develop at the correct rate. So you're going to notice that they're not going to grow as fast
Right.
as a puppy that's on kibble. So for those larger breed puppies where that is a big concern, that's achieved by doing natural forms of calcium through a raw diet. So some extra really great sources that have that perfect calcium to phosphorus ratio with fresh food is going to be grass-fed green tripe. Raw goat's milk is a great option. These are all things that we really recommend, especially through our raw feeding guide, that puppies would get more of these things because it really does give that appropriate higher levels of calcium. Their body can use what it needs. And that also gives you a couple of other options outside of bones so that, you aren't trying to feed so much bone that they become constipated either.
Right.
So those are some examples of great calcium sources that are going to allow your puppy to grow at the best rate for their body without doing too much too fast.
And that's important because one of the things that helps prevent hip dysplasia and other developmental disorders is a slower growth rate.
It's desired. You don't want a puppy to grow too fast.
I know. I mean, everybody loves to have, the Great Dane puppy that's ginormous when it's 7 or 8 months old, but that's not supposed to happen. They should be growing a little bit more slowly, and they should be developing thicker, denser, stronger bones rather than taller and longer. So when it comes to fat for puppies, DHA turns out to be like the more important essential fatty acid that we want those fats to provide. So there are specific fats that we want to add to the puppy's basic raw food diet that are going to help boost the amounts of DHA. And with this too, you want to have variety in these things. Don't just pick one thing and say, okay, this is what I'm going to give my puppy for additional fat in the diet. We want to have as much variety in the diet as possible. We don't want to have our puppy develop an allergy to, a specific ingredient. And so in that variety of things that we can feed our puppies that will specifically, like overall, increase the fat in the diet, but specifically increase the DHA.
Yeah, that's going to be things like your small oily fish. So we love whole sardines. That's one of our favorite. There's so much accomplished with a whole sardine, but they're really high in that DHA. You're also going to find it in things like green lip mussels, or green lip mussel oil is a great source. You're going to find it in cod liver oil is another one. High quality eggs are actually a good source of omega-3s and DHA, but your highest sources are going to be those, the fish type foods. And so that would be something that you would really just want to find some of those good small oily fish to rotate throughout the diet. You've got maybe a green lip mussel oil that you can kind of offer every once in a while, and really just make sure you hit that. But then also along with that, one thing that we've talked about before with puppies, they can get hangry when they don't have enough fat. And so some people will experience a very bitey puppy, especially later on in the day, because they've expended a lot of energy. Even if they've napped, there's still kind of this kind of hangry part of them that can come out, and they can be a lot more bitey, and you would be amazed at how satisfied that they can be if you give them something like a marrow bone and they can get that good marrow out, or maybe some grass-fed ghee is a great option. Another time, other times I've done something as simple as beef suet or beef fat, just a little chunk of frozen, so they have to chew through it. Sometimes if they're teething, that can actually be a nice option.
Sure.
You can add a little bit of Rescue Remedy, which is a great herbal, kind of a flower essence tincture. It's really easy to find. Rescue Remedy is great for those kind of teething puppies. It can really help kind of the stress, and you just kind of do a couple of drops on there. So, there's really not the concern that you're going to make your puppy overweight by doing these things. It's really carbs that are going to make your puppy overweight more than the fat would. They need that fat for healthy development, especially with their brain. And the more of that you can do that's high in DHA, the better off you are.
So when it comes to feeding your puppy more protein, obviously they need more of their basic raw food. That's going to be high in protein. Raw green tripe is high in protein. raw goat's milk. And a lot of these things are high in both protein and fat. So you get kind of double duty out of these things.
And the calcium, some of them are
Right.
that source too.
So with your growing puppies, what did you find was the best way to make sure that they were getting enough food without having obese puppies?
So it's a lot easier to achieve that when you're not feeding a carb-heavy food. When you are feeding raw food, it is a lot harder to make fat puppies. You can do it. You can certainly over raw feed a puppy. But really puppies, from the time that they're small, when I sent them to their home, to their families, they were 8 weeks old, and we had them on 10% of their body weight per day. And then we would split it up between, 3 meals. They didn't stay at 3 meals for very long. Eventually, within a few weeks, I was getting called, they don't want to eat their meal, blah, blah, blah. That means you need to back off and spread them out. And so, feeding twice a day is perfectly fine. Depends on the breed, depends on the puppy. Most of the time, that was my experience. And then what you're gonna do is, as the puppy grows, you're going to reduce the percentage that you're feeding every day, but it is certainly going to be in proportion much higher than what you would feed, an adult, percentage-wise. And so we do have a really great set of feeding guidelines for puppies in our raw feeding guide, where it just kind of gives you that scale of, at this many months of age, they should be, at about this percentage of their body weight. And it shows you kind of how to reasonably expect their food amounts to change as they grow, because then also in those later puppy months, their growth rate's gonna slow down. And so, you're gonna maybe change that percentage a little bit differently. But this idea that, they should just eat this tremendous amount of food all the way up till they're a year old, you will end up with a fat puppy. Yeah. So it is important to really kind of monitor that. So really, if you have the feeding guidelines and you have a scale where you can weigh your puppy, it's very easy to do, and you don't have to do it every day. If they're going through a growth spurt, maybe you weigh them once a week, once every 2 weeks, and just make sure that they're getting enough. I will say, with puppies that are started out on raw food, they're very good at self-regulation typically. And so we always wanted to ensure that they were getting enough. And so we put out more food than what we thought they needed. Sometimes they wouldn't finish it. Sometimes they finished it all. Right. It just depends. But again, because you're not having that carb-heavy food, it's just not as much of a concern. They're going to eat until they're satisfied and they're full, and you're not going to have to worry about putting a ton of weight on a puppy, because they're getting nutrient-dense foods, they're getting fat, which is a good source of energy, and it's not going to do the same things that carbs is going to do.
Absolutely. Do puppies need to be fed differently from adult dogs? Yes, there are certain nutrients that they need more of. So they need more fat, they need more protein, they need more calcium than adult dogs. It's a lot easier to do in the context of a balanced raw diet. You're just much less likely to mess anything up.
So really, they're going to eat the same thing raw food wise as an adult would eat. You're just going to offer certain things more often. And we account for that in our raw feeding guide as well. And so I think, don't be afraid of fat. I think a lot of people are very afraid of fat. Make sure the calcium sources are correct and bioavailable. Make sure they're getting plenty of protein, which if you're feeding a raw diet, that's, just feeding more of that raw diet is going to give them that extra protein.
Exactly.
So that's really the big differences. And so if you go and you look at what's on the shelf, there is a difference between, commercially made puppy food versus, adult kibble. The one thing to be careful of with even like raw food companies that make a puppy food, you don't want to only feed that puppy food, because it's typically 1 or 2, maybe 3 proteins are going to be in that puppy food. And variety is so, so, so important. I would even say that, I've had families that have taken my puppies home that have kind of made that mistake, and the puppy will eventually refuse to eat it. They get sick of it and they get bored of it, which that says a lot. I mean, if they're kind of telling you, I don't even want to eat that. So variety is very, very, very important. So if you find raw puppy food, that's great. You still need to make sure that there's a wide variety of proteins. You're going to head off at the pass, higher risk for allergies. You're going to give them a bigger variety of nutrients, varieties, levels of fat. All of that stuff is going to be part of why we are so adamant about feeding a variety and that balancing over time. And they need variety more often than adults do. You can go a little bit longer in between, you know, offering different proteins with adults. You really should not do that with puppies. It should be different. At least every 2 days, you should be doing something different.
Yep.
All of this is very easy to manage. It's just a matter of being a little bit organized. And again, we cover all of this in our raw feeding guide. It's the foundational principles, and then we give plenty of good special considerations for puppies. What should be given extra in their diet, about how often, what are the feeding guidelines. It's all in there. So we'll put that down in the description box below. We're also going to attach a couple of videos at the end of this. If you're wanting to learn a little bit more about raw diet, we've covered it in podcasts, we've covered it in other videos, because it was one of our favorite things to talk about, because it is that important. So hopefully this helps the next time you go to feed your puppy.